"We want a peaceful Thanksgiving with your sister's family," my parents texted. I replied, "Enjoy." They had no idea I'd already arranged for the entire extended family to join me at my newly purchased French villa when they saw the photos. But it was too late. I was sitting in my apartment scrolling through my phone when the text came in. It was from my mom. The words were simple, and on the surface they seemed harmless. "Hey honey, hope you're doing well. Just wanted to let you know we're planning a quiet Thanksgiving with Emma's family this year. Would love to have you, but if you want something more low-key, feel free to do your own thing." I stared at the message for a long time. As the sting began to settle in, it wasn't just about Thanksgiving. It was about everything that had led up to this. My whole life I had been the afterthought, the one who worked hard, made her own way, and still never seemed to get the acknowledgement she deserved. Emma, on the other hand, was the golden child, the one who never had to try too hard and still seemed to have everything handed to her. I had just made senior partner at the law firm, a milestone I'd worked my ass off for, but did my parents even acknowledge that? No. They celebrated Emma's latest vacation photos more than my promotion. I couldn't even remember the last time they took me out to celebrate my success, even when I had made it clear how important it was to me. And now Thanksgiving. It was always a quiet affair at my parents' house, but every year it was Emma and her picture-perfect family, and me, sitting off to the side like an afterthought. This year they were doing it again, this time just with Emma's family, without even offering me a place at the table. I glanced down at the text again, the words now feeling like a punch to my gut. I wasn't even part of their plans anymore. No matter how much I accomplished, no matter how many sacrifices I made to support them, I was never going to be their priority. Emma was the one they always celebrated, the one they always praised. A part of me wanted to text back, to beg for an explanation, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. Not for them. I had spent years trying to earn their approval, but every time I did something right they shrugged it off while Emma could do no wrong. It was exhausting. So I put my phone down and sighed. There was no way I was going to spend another Thanksgiving like this. No way I was going to let this pass without asserting my independence. That night, I sat down at my desk and started making plans. If they wanted to exclude me, fine. I would do things my way. This holiday was going to be different. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table anymore. I would create my own tradition, one that didn't revolve around me always being second best. The next morning, I contacted a few people who had always supported me, cousins, aunts, and uncles, and told them my plan. I had a feeling this Thanksgiving would be the start of something much bigger, something that would finally give me the respect and recognition I had always deserved. I was going to do this my way. No more compromises. No more second place. I couldn't wait to show them all that I didn't need them to validate me. This Thanksgiving I would finally be in control. I had always dreamed of owning a place far from the prying eyes of family, somewhere I could escape the suffocating weight of expectations, a place where I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. And so, about 3 months ago I made a decision, an impulsive one some would say, but it felt right. I bought a villa on the Mediterranean coast of France. It wasn't a crazy whim. I could afford it, and it was exactly what I needed. I had spent so many years building my career, taking care of everyone around me, but no one had ever really taken care of me. Now I was doing it for myself. The villa was everything I wanted and more. Panoramic views of the sea, a lush garden with wildflowers swaying in the breeze, and an interior that blended rustic charm with modern elegance. The kitchen was equipped with every tool I could dream of, and the living room opened up to a terrace where I could sit for hours, staring out at the horizon. It felt like a place where I could breathe again. I stood in the living room now, a glass of white wine in hand, looking out over the sea. The villa was quiet, but I didn't feel lonely. In fact, for the first time in years I felt at peace. This place was mine, no one could take that away from me. I thought back to the decision I had made to host Thanksgiving here. It wasn't just a spontaneous idea. No, I had been planning it for months. I'd been toying with the idea of finally taking control of my holidays, of creating a tradition that was solely mine, a place where people who truly appreciated me could come and celebrate. The ones who supported me, who saw me for who I really was, not the person my parents or my sister thought I should be. I hadn't told my parents or Emma about the villa. I didn't need to. This was my escape, my life, my independence. They wouldn't understand anyway. They'd either criticize my decision to spend money on something they couldn't fathom, or they'd find a way to make it about Emma's life instead of mine. But my extended family, my aunts, uncles, and cousins, those were the people I wanted around me. They were the ones who understood. They were the ones who had supported me all along, whether it was in my career or my personal life. I invited them, and to my surprise, they were thrilled. The plan was simple. We would have a big Thanksgiving dinner, but it wasn't going to be like the one my parents hosted. No, this time it was going to be intimate and full of life. There would be cooking classes, vineyard tours, and a lot of laughter. We'd explore the local culture, eat delicious food, and enjoy each other's company, something I hadn't done in years. And the best part? It was all going to be on my terms. As I sat down at the table, looking over the final guest list and all the plans I had made for the week, I felt a surge of excitement. I was finally doing something that felt right, something that wasn't about meeting anyone's expectations except my own. I poured myself another glass of wine and smiled. Thanksgiving was only a few days away and I couldn't wait. This villa, this celebration, it was everything I had been working toward. No longer would I be the invisible sister, the one who was constantly overlooked and taken for granted. This year I would be the one creating the memories. I would be the one leading the way. And for the first time in a long time that felt like enough. I sat at the long wooden table in the villa's dining room, surrounded by my notes and the guest list on my laptop. The glow of the afternoon sun filtered through the windows, casting a warm golden hue across the room. It was the kind of light that made everything feel right, like I was finally stepping into my own, like everything was falling into place. I had sent the invitations out a week ago, and I was already receiving excited replies from my extended family. My Aunt Marie, always the first to respond, had called me as soon as she saw the email. "Olivia, this is incredible. A whole Thanksgiving in France? Count us in," she had said, her voice filled with the enthusiasm I had missed hearing from anyone in my immediate family for years. My cousin Jake had sent me a text with a simple, "You're a legend, Liv. Can't wait." My Uncle James, with his usual dry humor, had written, "I'll bring the wine. You bring the holiday spirit." It was all so different from what I was used to. No forced smiles, no pretending to care. These were the people who knew me. They were the ones who had been there for me when things had been tough, and they were the ones who had cheered for my accomplishments without jealousy or backhanded remarks. But the contrast to the responses from my immediate family couldn't have been starker. I hadn't heard a peep from Emma, not a word. My parents, on the other hand, had responded with the kind of indifference that made me feel invisible all over again. It was my mother who had sent a brief text. "Hope everything goes well, Liv. Just don't forget we're having a small Thanksgiving here with Emma's family." That was it. No congratulations, no excitement about my new life. Just a reminder of how they always put Emma first, how they didn't see what I was doing as important enough to be part of. I hadn't replied. I didn't need to. They had made their choice and I had made mine. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the messages again, enjoying the feeling of being truly seen for once. Aunt Marie had sent another message. "By the way, Liv, I heard about your promotion. You must be over the moon. Can't wait to celebrate with you." I typed back a quick response, telling her that it had been a lot of hard work, but it felt good to finally get the recognition. A few more texts came through, each one expressing excitement and genuine warmth. It made me feel like I had built something worth celebrating. And then just as I was getting comfortable in this new chapter of my life, I received another message, this one from Emma. "Hey Liv, I saw your Thanksgiving plans on social media. Not sure why you didn't just tell us. We're just doing a quiet dinner here. Thought it might be easier for you, but I hope you're having fun with all your friends." It took everything in me not to roll my eyes as I read the message. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an offer to join in. It was an attempt to make me feel small, as if I had somehow overstepped by daring to live life on my own terms. I stared at the text for a few moments, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to respond, to remind her that I wasn't going to play this game anymore, but I didn't. Instead, I simply locked my phone and set it aside. This Thanksgiving wasn't about Emma or my parents. It was about me. For the first time in a long time, I was going to have a holiday where I wasn't an afterthought. The days leading up to the event were filled with excitement and preparations. I spent time finalizing the menu with the chef I had hired for the week. We were going to have an incredible spread, everything from traditional Thanksgiving dishes to local French delicacies. I even arranged for a private vineyard tour for the day after Thanksgiving, a perfect way to unwind after the big dinner. Aunt Marie and Uncle James arrived a couple of days early, eager to explore the area before the festivities began. They marveled at the villa, exclaiming over every detail. I felt a warmth inside as I showed them around, proud of everything I had created here. "Liv, this place is amazing," Aunt Marie said, her eyes wide. "You've really outdone yourself. This is your life now, huh? You've worked hard for it." I smiled. "Yeah, I guess I have. It feels good to finally have something that's just mine." Later that night we sat out on the terrace, sipping wine and chatting, the sea breeze gently cooling the air. For the first time in ages I felt like I belonged somewhere. This wasn't a family holiday where I was second fiddle to Emma. This was my holiday, surrounded by people who appreciated me for who I was, not what I could do for them. As the evening wore on, I couldn't help but think of my parents and Emma. What would they think when they saw the pictures of us all laughing around the dinner table, my family in France, while they sat in their quiet home with Emma and her family? Part of me felt guilty for leaving them out, but that guilt faded quickly. This wasn't about them. This was about me finally making my own decisions, carving out my own space in the world. And when Thanksgiving Day came, I was ready to create new memories, memories that would last a lifetime, and to show everyone, most of all myself, that I was worth celebrating. The day before Thanksgiving was a whirlwind of activity. The villa was bustling with life as the final touches were put in place. The staff had been working around the clock, ensuring everything was perfect. The private chef had already set up a tasting session for the following day, and the vineyard tour was confirmed. I had meticulously planned every detail, down to the tiniest decoration, and now it was all coming together. The house was alive with laughter and conversation as Aunt Marie and Uncle James explored the local village. They'd spent the afternoon picking out local wines for the dinner, and I could hear their laughter floating in from the kitchen as they chatted with the chef. I wandered through the villa, checking on everything. The table was set in the grand dining room, gleaming under the soft glow of chandeliers, a perfect blend of rustic and elegant. The centerpiece was a collection of fresh flowers in autumn tones, delicate but vibrant. I stepped back, admiring it for a moment before heading to the wine cellar, eager to check the selection for tomorrow. The villa felt different now. It felt like a home, my home. A place where I could breathe, where I could be myself. No more pretending to fit into the mold my family had set for me. No more biting my tongue when they overlooked me. No more fighting for a seat at the table. This was my time to shine, my time to create memories, and I was determined to enjoy every second. By mid-afternoon, my cousins and extended family started arriving. I greeted them with a smile, hugging each one as they stepped off the buses, their faces lighting up when they saw the villa for the first time. Their excitement was contagious, and it made all the hard work worthwhile. I caught sight of Aunt Marie and Uncle James as they walked in, holding a couple of bottles of wine they'd picked up during their excursion. "This place is breathtaking, Liv," Aunt Marie said, her eyes wide with admiration. "You really did this. This is your dream come true." I nodded, my chest swelling with pride. "It feels good. This is exactly what I needed." As the rest of the family filtered in, I couldn't help but notice the contrast to the holidays I'd spent with my parents in years past. There was no tension in the air, no subtle competition, no one looking over their shoulder to see what Emma was doing. It was just easy, fun. Uncle James, ever the joker, made a beeline for the wine cellar. "Let me make sure everything is up to standard," he joked, giving me a wink. I laughed, knowing that he had no idea what he was doing when it came to wine, but I appreciated the effort. A few minutes later, Aunt Marie and I were joined by cousins and friends as we prepared for the evening's welcome dinner. I had planned it as a casual affair, a way to ease into the big day ahead. We had a variety of tapas, both French and American, and everyone gathered around the large dining table in the villa's cozy lounge area. I watched as people took their seats, chatted animatedly, and poured their glasses of wine. My heart swelled as I realized this was my family, not the family who had always put Emma first, but the family who had truly supported me. As we sat down to eat, I looked around at the faces of the people who had been there for me, the people who saw me for who I was. The laughter was natural, the stories flowing freely. No judgments, no undercurrents of competition, just joy. At one point I slipped outside for a moment to take it all in. The view of the sea, the crisp evening air, the soft sounds of laughter filtering through the open windows. It was peaceful, my peaceful. I let out a contented sigh, leaning against the railing. This was what I had been searching for. A place where I didn't have to fight for attention, where I could just be myself with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide. But even as I relished the moment, a small thought nagged at me. How would my parents react when they saw the pictures? How would they feel knowing that I had created a holiday that was mine without them? I shook the thought off. This wasn't about them, not anymore. It was about me finally taking control of my life and my choices. And this Thanksgiving, surrounded by my extended family, was the start of something new. When everyone had settled in for the evening, I took a moment to step outside and look up at the stars. The villa, the family, the freedom, it was all so surreal. And tomorrow would be even better. I was ready to show the world, most of all myself, that I could do this, that I didn't need approval from anyone else. Tomorrow, I would create a Thanksgiving that would be remembered for years to come. I smiled to myself and turned back inside. It was time to enjoy the celebration, surrounded by the people who mattered most. The evening before Thanksgiving was everything I had hoped for and more. The villa hummed with the energy of a family truly enjoying each other's company. It wasn't just the atmosphere or the food, it was the feeling of connection, of genuine joy, something I hadn't felt at a family gathering in years. The dinner was casual but elegant, a mix of American and French cuisine, perfectly prepared by the private chef who had become a little like family in the short time we'd known each other. There were roasted vegetables, buttery mashed potatoes, and the perfect turkey with crispy skin and juicy meat. The French touch came with rich cheeses, freshly baked baguettes, and a few delicate tarts for dessert. Everyone gathered around the large dining table in the villa's grand dining room, and I felt a sense of pride as I watched my family, laughing and sharing stories. The room was filled with warmth, the clinking of glasses, and the rich aroma of good food. My cousins and aunts were in their element, reminiscing about childhood holidays and laughing about old family mishaps. I raised my glass, standing at the head of the table. To family, I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. To those who have always supported us, and to the traditions we create for ourselves. Cheers! Cheers! They all responded in unison, clinking their glasses together. I sat back down, feeling an unexpected wave of gratitude. This wasn't just about the villa or the food. It was about finally being in a place where I could let go, where I could be me without worrying about judgment or living up to anyone's standards. As the evening wore on, we dined and laughed, and I felt more and more at ease. The conversations flowed from one topic to the next, from childhood memories to current events, with no tension in the air. No one was worried about keeping up appearances. No one was trying to prove anything. There were no undercurrents of competition or bitterness, just love. At one point, Aunt Marie stood up to toast, her glass of red wine held high. Liv, I just want to say, this is the kind of Thanksgiving I've always dreamed of. You've created something beautiful here. You deserve all of this and more. I blinked, surprised at the genuine sincerity in her voice. Thank you, Aunt Marie. I really needed this. She smiled warmly, her eyes twinkling. Well, you did it, darling. You've created your own tradition, and that's something no one can take away from you. The weight of her words settled over me, and for a moment, I felt the tears threatening to well up, but I held them back, knowing that this was my time. This was my moment to embrace what I had built. Not just this villa, but my life, my choices, my path. As the night continued, we moved from the dinner table to the lounge, where the laughter continued to spill over. We played games, shared more stories, and even sang along to some old tunes. The night was filled with so much joy and warmth, and I realized something. This was what family was supposed to feel like. This wasn't about obligations or expectations. This was about love, acceptance, and being together. When it was finally time to call it a night, I stood on the terrace for a moment, looking out over the sparkling lights of the villa. The sea was calm, the moon reflecting off the water. I felt at peace more than I had in years. Tomorrow would be the big day, the day I had planned and prepared for. But tonight I could just be present. I could enjoy the moment. I looked up at the stars and whispered to myself, this is my Thanksgiving, and it's everything I've ever wanted. Tomorrow I would celebrate with my family, the family who truly saw me, and no one, not even my parents or Emma, could take that away. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. Thanksgiving morning arrived with the promise of something new, something I had spent months working toward. The villa was alive with the buzz of activity. Family members were already up and about, helping with last-minute preparations, laughing and chatting over coffee in the kitchen. The air smelled like cinnamon and roasted coffee, mingling with the salty sea breeze that wafted through the open windows. I stood in the kitchen, chopping herbs for the stuffing, the soft clinking of knives on the cutting board a soothing rhythm in the background. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a soft golden glow through the villa. It was the perfect morning, calm and peaceful. My phone buzzed on the countertop, breaking my reverie. I glanced at the screen and saw a name I wasn't eager to see, my mother. I hesitated for a moment, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. I had been avoiding their calls, their messages, since I left for France. But today I couldn't avoid it forever. I picked up the phone, swiping the screen to answer. Hi, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the tension in my shoulders. Olivia, honey, she said, her voice light and familiar, but there was an edge to it that made my stomach twist. I just wanted to check in. I know it's Thanksgiving and everything, and I just wanted to see how you're doing. I glanced out the window, the gentle waves crashing against the shore, a contrast to the tension I could feel rising in my chest. I'm doing well, Mom, I said, keeping my tone neutral. The villa's beautiful, and everything's coming together for dinner. I've got a full day ahead of me, but it's nice. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost picture her sitting there, her hands clasped tightly, unsure of what to say next. I braced myself. You know, we're having a quiet dinner here with Emma's family, she said, as if I hadn't already heard that from her 100 times. We're keeping it small and intimate, just a few people, so it'll be nice. The tightness in my chest increased. I could feel the words hanging between us, but I didn't let myself snap. Not yet. That sounds nice, I said, my voice flat. I couldn't bring myself to say more, couldn't bring myself to ask the questions that were on the tip of my tongue. Why didn't you invite me? Wasn't I important enough for your Thanksgiving? Olivia, sweetheart, my mother continued, I know you're busy with your plans over there, but we're all thinking of you. I just wanted to remind you that we'll be having some dessert later in the evening. You should join us if you're free. You know, family should be together on holidays. I paused, the words burning in my throat. I'm in the middle of hosting a large celebration here, Mom. I'm kind of busy with all the details. The words were polite, but I could hear the slight edge to them. But thank you for thinking of me. I could hear her sigh on the other end of the line. Well, I understand, she said, though I could tell it wasn't with the full sincerity I wanted to hear. We just thought you might be lonely over there. Emma and her family, they're always so happy when you're around. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to lash out. Emma's family. Again, my mother's words were like salt in an old wound. Emma's family, always first, always the priority. I'm not lonely, Mom, I said, my voice firmer now. I've got my extended family here, the people who actually appreciate me. There was a long, uncomfortable silence. I could feel the weight of the conversation pressing on me, and I knew this call was going nowhere. I'll let you get back to your day, my mom said, her voice softer now. Just don't forget we love you, okay? I won't, I said, but the words felt hollow. We said our goodbyes and I ended the call, setting the phone down on the counter with a little more force than I intended. I stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath, letting the tension roll off me. The call was a reminder of how far apart my family and I had grown. They didn't understand. They didn't get it. And the more I tried to fit into their world, the more they ignored who I really was. But today wasn't about them. Today was about me. I walked back into the kitchen, feeling the warmth of the family that was here, the family who truly cared about me. The guests were starting to gather in the living room, and I could hear the sounds of laughter filling the villa. My cousins, my aunts, my uncles, these were the people who truly celebrated me, not because of what I could do for them, but because they loved me for who I was. I smiled, feeling the weight in my chest lift a little. Thanksgiving would go on without my parents, without Emma, but it would be mine and it would be filled with people who valued me. It was time to move forward. No more looking back. Today was about creating new memories. The Thanksgiving dinner at the villa was everything I had hoped for and more. It was alive with laughter and warmth, a perfect contrast to the cold, distant holidays of my past. The guests had gathered around the table, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I truly belonged. There was no jealousy, no tension, just people who appreciated each other's company. As we finished dessert and settled in for the evening, I felt a sense of contentment that I had never experienced during any of my family's holiday gatherings. I was surrounded by the people who mattered most, not the people who expected something from me. I could finally breathe. The night was winding down, but just as I was starting to relax, my phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting it to be another message from one of my cousins, but when I saw the name on the screen, my heart sank. It was from my mother. I hesitated for a moment before swiping the screen to answer. Hello, Olivia. My mother's voice came through, strained and almost too sweet. I hope you're enjoying yourself over there. I just wanted to talk to you for a second. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. What's going on, Mom? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. You know, she began, her words slow. I didn't want to say anything earlier, but I just saw something. I got a text from Emma, and she was really surprised you didn't tell us about your villa. We all thought you were just too busy for us. I frowned. I had expected something like this to happen, but hearing the words from her still stung. I looked around the room at the laughter and warmth of my extended family, realizing just how little I owed them, how little I had ever owed them. I didn't respond right away, instead letting the weight of her words hang in the air. When I finally spoke, I was calm, measured. I didn't feel the need to tell you, Mom. You've never shown much interest in my life, especially not when it comes to anything I've worked hard for. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could feel her hesitation. Olivia, that's not true, she said quickly. We care about you, of course we do. We just didn't expect you to keep something like this from us. Your family should know about the big things in your life. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Your family. It was the same old story. My family, the ones who always saw me as second best, the ones who made me feel invisible no matter how much I gave. They didn't deserve to know about this life, this peace I had finally found. I'm not asking for your approval, Mom, I said, my voice firm now. I'm living my life for me, not for anyone else. And I don't owe you an explanation for it. Another silence stretched between us. I could almost hear her scrambling for the right words, but I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Look, Olivia, she finally said, her voice softening. I just don't want there to be any hard feelings. We're family. Family should be together, especially on holidays. I let out a breath, shaking my head even though she couldn't see it. We're not together, Mom, I said quietly. Not in the way that matters. You never made the effort to understand me. You always made Emma the priority. You always made me feel like I didn't fit in. I'm tired of pretending. There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was small, almost apologetic. I didn't know you felt that way. I closed my eyes, taking in the beauty of the villa around me, the laughter from the people who truly cared about me. I don't expect you to understand, but I'm done letting your expectations control my life. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, as if she didn't know how to respond, and that was fine. There was nothing more to say. I've got to go, Mom, I said, my voice calm but resolute. Enjoy your Thanksgiving with Emma and her family. I'll be fine here. Before she could say anything else, I ended the call. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment, but I didn't look back at it. I couldn't. I took a deep breath, looking out at the sea, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, a reminder of how far I had come. This Thanksgiving was mine. I had created it and no one could take that away from me. And as the night carried on, I found myself feeling lighter. The weight of the conversation with my mother slowly faded, and I focused instead on the people in the room with me. These were the ones who saw me for who I truly was. Tomorrow I would make more memories, the kind that mattered. And as for my family back home, well, they would have to figure out their own way forward without me. For the first time in years, I was free. The days after Thanksgiving were filled with laughter and joy, but as the excitement of the holiday began to settle, I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of satisfaction. The villa was still full of family, and we had spent the entire weekend exploring the region, laughing over wine, and making memories I knew I would carry with me forever. Aunt Marie had taken plenty of photos, and I had already started to see them pop up on social media, tagging me in posts that showed our group laughing around the table, toasting with glasses raised high, and taking walks along the cliffside. It felt like a victory, like I had finally created something I could be proud of, a tradition that was entirely mine. And as I saw those photos, I couldn't help but think about the photos my parents and Emma were posting from their quiet Thanksgiving. I was sure they had their own way of celebrating, but it wasn't the same. They didn't have this. They didn't have the family who truly saw me. But the quiet afterglow of the holiday was interrupted when my phone buzzed early one morning. I had just gotten back from a jog along the coastline, the salty air fresh in my lungs, and I was looking forward to a cup of coffee on the terrace. The screen flashed with an incoming message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my stomach sank. It was from my mother. "Mom, we saw the photos. Looks like you had quite the time. Emma was hurt that you didn't tell her about the villa. She feels like you've been shutting her out. We're concerned about you, Olivia. Don't you think it's time to come back home and talk things through?" The word stung, especially the part about Emma being hurt. My hand trembled slightly as I read the message again. She felt hurt? After everything she'd done, after everything my parents had done, this was what I got? I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath, trying to calm the simmering anger that was slowly building. It was the same thing over and over. They expected me to come running when they snapped their fingers, but when I took charge of my own life, when I made the decision to live for me, they couldn't handle it. I set my phone down on the table and stared out at the sea for a long moment. Part of me wanted to call her back, to tell her exactly what I had been thinking for years, to finally say the words that had been trapped inside me for so long. But instead I did nothing. I didn't respond. The next day I woke up to more messages, this time from my Aunt Marie, my cousin Jake, and even Uncle James. They were all so happy with how everything had gone, and they couldn't stop talking about how much fun they had, how peaceful it was to just enjoy the holiday without the usual family drama. Their words were a balm to the hurt, the anger, and the disappointment that lingered after reading my mom's message. But still, I knew the time was coming. The time when my parents would find out just how far I had gone to create a new life for myself. I knew they would reach out, that they would ask questions, and that Emma would try to make me feel guilty for leaving them behind. The quiet moments were the calm before the storm. Later that evening, I decided to take control of the situation. I sat down at my laptop and wrote a message to my mother. I didn't want to say too much, but I knew it was time to finally make it clear to her that I was no longer going to play the role they had always assigned to me, the daughter who never mattered as much as Emma, the one who had to settle for second place. "Olivia, I'm living my life for me now, Mom. I've worked hard for everything I have, and I'm finally surrounded by the people who truly care about me. I'm sorry if that hurts you, but this is my reality. I'm not coming back to talk things through, because the truth is, there's nothing left to fix. This Thanksgiving was a step for me, one I had to take on my own. I'm not asking for your approval anymore." I hit send and leaned back in my chair, exhaling deeply. I wasn't sure what to expect next, but I felt lighter somehow, as though a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't about severing ties. It was about finally standing up for myself, acknowledging that I deserved better, that I didn't have to bend to their expectations anymore. The next morning my phone buzzed again. This time it was from Emma. The message was short, sharp, and filled with the kind of bitterness I had come to expect from her. "Emma, I guess I'm not surprised, Olivia. I always knew you'd choose your fancy villa over your family. You've been shutting us out for years. Enjoy your new life, but don't expect us to be there when it all falls apart." I read the message twice, and the only thing I felt was a quiet sense of relief. It was all out in the open now. I didn't need to be the one who always fixed things, who always gave in. I wasn't a doormat anymore. I set my phone down and stood up, stretching my arms above my head as I took in the view. The sky was a deep shade of blue, the sea sparkling in the morning light. I had everything I needed right here: peace, freedom, and a family that truly valued me. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. I turned back to the kitchen, ready to start another day in my new life, without the weight of old expectations dragging me down. The storm had passed. It was time to move forward. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer had a hold on me. This Thanksgiving had marked the end of a chapter, and the beginning of a new one. And as the days went on, I would continue to build this life, surrounded by the people who saw me for who I truly was. And nothing, no message, no guilt trip, could take that away from me. The days after Thanksgiving passed in a blur of laughter, good food, and moments of peaceful solitude. The villa had become a sanctuary, a place where I could finally hear my own thoughts without the constant hum of family expectations in the background. It was a feeling I wasn't sure I would ever have again, and I savored every moment of it. But as the days wore on, the inevitable texts and calls from my family began to slow. I hadn't heard from my mother or Emma since that last exchange. Their silence, though heavy at first, began to feel more like freedom than punishment. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore, waiting for their approval, and for the first time in years I felt like I could breathe. Aunt Marie, Uncle James, and the rest of my extended family had returned to their own homes, but the warmth of their presence lingered. The villa was quiet now, except for the occasional rustle of wind outside or the soft murmur of the waves against the shore. But I was okay with it. For the first time in ages, I was alone and happy with my own company. One evening after dinner, I sat out on the terrace, wrapped in a soft blanket, sipping tea and watching the stars. The sky was clear, the moon reflecting off the water in a quiet, peaceful way. As I gazed out at the horizon, I realized that I hadn't thought about Christmas at all. Thanksgiving had been my focus, my first real holiday spent exactly how I wanted. But now, with Christmas approaching, I felt the familiar tug of a new tradition, one that wasn't anchored in the past. It wasn't going to be another holiday where I played second fiddle to Emma's perfect life, or tried to fit into a mold my family had created for me. I wanted something different, something that was mine. I took out my phone and began typing a message to Aunt Marie. I had already talked with her a bit about my plans, but now it was time to make it official. Olivia. Hey Aunt Marie. I've been thinking about Christmas. I was wondering if you and Uncle James would be interested in joining me for a holiday getaway in the Swiss Alps. I want to create something special, just us. No pressure, but I thought it might be a fun way to start a new tradition. I paused for a moment, rereading the message before I hit send. It wasn't that I didn't care about the rest of the family, I did. But this Christmas, I wanted to escape the usual drama and expectations. I wanted a holiday where I could feel like myself, surrounded by people who truly appreciated my presence. Aunt Marie replied almost immediately, her excitement clear in her response. Aunt Marie. Liv, that sounds incredible. You know I'm in. We've been talking about getting away for Christmas for years but never made it happen. I can't wait to see where this takes us. I smiled at the message, the excitement bubbling up inside me. This was exactly what I needed, a getaway with people who understood me, who saw me for who I really was. I began making the arrangements the next day, booking a beautiful chalet in the Swiss Alps. I had visited the region once before, and the thought of spending Christmas there, surrounded by snow-covered peaks and the scent of pine trees, felt like the perfect next chapter. As I finished finalizing the details, I began to reflect on how much had changed in just a few short months. Not only had I created a new Thanksgiving tradition, but now I was building a Christmas celebration that would be just as meaningful. It wasn't about the people who had excluded me. It was about the people who had always supported me. Later that week, as the last of the arrangements were set, I felt a sense of satisfaction that I hadn't expected. The past year had been challenging, but it had also been incredibly transformative. I had finally taken control of my own life and I was building something I could be proud of. I no longer had to fight for my place at the table. That evening, as I gazed out at the view from the villa one last time before I packed my things, I thought about what the future held. Maybe it would be filled with more holidays like these. Holidays where I was free from old expectations, free to build my own traditions and create memories with the people who truly valued me. I smiled softly, taking one last look at the sea, and then turned to pack for the Alps. This was just the beginning. I was done with the past, and now I was focused on the future where I would finally be the one to decide what mattered most. As I prepared to leave, I got one last text from my mother. Mom. Olivia, I've been thinking about things. I know we've had our differences, but I'm your mother. I'd like to try again. I want to be there for you. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a mix of emotions. For so long I had craved their approval, but now it no longer held the same power over me. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a deep breath, put my phone down and finished packing. I didn't need to fix anything anymore. I was finally at peace with where I was and who I had become. As I closed the door to the villa and stepped out into the cool, crisp air, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was moving forward, and I was going to make this Christmas my Christmas, one to remember. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about what anyone else thought. It was time to live for me,